Hey everybody, and good Tuesday evening. It's Weather for Weather Geeks time. We had a seasonable but very pleasant October day today. We started out with a chill in the air this morning, upper 30s and lower 40s. But we got into the mid 60s for the afternoon, pretty much par for the course during early October. Lower 40s, middle 60s for lows and for highs. I wanted to start this evening with a time-lapse video from our Columbiana cam. It was a nice sunrise. You may have noticed some haze in the air, especially this afternoon in the western sky particularly. And this was actually a return of some of that wildfire smoke. This was a big story, of course, a couple of weeks ago. Hasn't been much of a story since, but there was actually a relatively thin plume of this that did return to the area today. Now, this is shifting off to the east, and I think this will not be a story for the rest of the week. But today we did have kind of a thin layer of that high-altitude wildfire smoke. I mentioned it was a seasonable day today. We got to 65. Locally this afternoon, 67 in Pittsburgh. Up in Cleveland, they approached 70 this afternoon. All right, let's go down to the tropics briefly here because this is a pretty big story. Now, this has been explosive development of Hurricane Delta. This was a tropical depression a little more than 24 hours ago, and now it's a Category 4 storm with winds of 145, the pressure down there to 956. For a really big, healthy Category 4 storm, it's hard to see an eye on the satellite picture. This has what's known as a pinhole eye. It's a very tiny eye to this system, and it's not obvious on satellite pictures, especially when you're zoomed out a little bit. But this is a frightening looking storm, and big resort area, of course, Cancun, Mexico, in the Yucatan Peninsula, kind of this area that sticks out of Mexico right in here. This is going to be a big problem tonight and tomorrow. Vacationers and tourists are fleeing and dealing with long lines at the airports out ahead of this thing. Now, once it emerges into the Central Gulf, it's going to encounter waters that aren't quite as warm, but still, it'll probably be a major hurricane for a while, hopefully losing some of its strength as we head towards landfall in the U.S. later Friday into Friday night. But it's possible this is still a major Category 3, at least, hurricane, making landfall somewhere between far eastern Texas and kind of the New Orleans area in eastern Louisiana. That's going to be a big deal. For us, we'll talk about potential impacts from Delta later on in this video, but in the meantime, it's pretty quiet across the lower 48 states. We do have a cold front that is moving across the upper Midwest. This is the front that's heading our way tomorrow with little fanfare other than a gusty breeze. But otherwise, yeah, not a lot going on across the lower 48 states. Now, we do have some clouds around as of this recording at about 6:30 this evening, but with the sky clearing later on tonight, it'll be a pretty good night to check out Mars in the sky, which is very bright right now. Mars and Earth are relatively close right now in their orbits around the sun, and so only 38.6 million miles separates Earth and Mars right now. Sounds like a big number, but you know, when you're talking about the cosmos, this number's not really that big, the distance between the two planets right now. So that's making Mars appear pretty large. It's also what we call opposition. It basically means the Earth is directly between Mars and the sun. It means the entire face of Mars is illuminated by the sun, just like when we have a full moon. And so that makes it really bright, really obvious, and Mars will not be this close to the Earth again until 2035, so it's going to be 15 years before we have probably this good of a chance to check out Mars with binoculars, with a telescope, of course, especially. But even to the naked eye, it's obvious which dot in the sky is Mars. It has a reddish tint, and unlike stars, planets do not blink up in the sky, so yeah, check that out. Not only this evening, but over the next several evenings, and even over the next couple of weeks. All right, our front tomorrow will not do much other than kick up the wind. 25 to 35 mile per hour gusts, I think, will be pretty common from late morning into the afternoon, but any rain's going to stay well off to our north and east up across New England. We'll be dry into the day Thursday, a cooler but pleasant day Thursday, and then as high pressure moves off to the east, return flow around that high, and a warm front heading our way. Be a little more of a southerly component to the wind, and a warm-up is coming our way for Friday. All right, what's going to happen with Delta's moisture once it makes landfall? I think the bulk of it, the heaviest of it, is almost certainly going to be to our south. That being said, some of the modeling is showing us getting grazed on Monday and Tuesday by some of that moisture. So you look at the longer range models here, not a drop of rain through the weekend, but Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday. See our models starting to shift up a little bit here. showing that some rain may become a possibility as we get into the first half of next week, but at this point I don't think it will be a very big deal. When we start talking about the longer range, of course, we've been talking about how a warm-up is coming next week, this weekend into next week. When we start looking now farther into the longer range, while next week will probably start with pretty balmy temperatures, this trough is shown on a lot of the modeling now to start digging back into the Great Lakes towards the end of next week, into next weekend. So while this weekend is likely to bring temperatures in the lower and middle 70s, next weekend will probably be a lot more typical of mid-October, and that means maybe we have highs in the 50s and lower 60s by next weekend. Pretty much par for the course, of course, by mid-October. Next weekend we should be getting close to peak foliage, maybe just entering peak foliage across eastern Ohio and western PA by next weekend. Just a reminder that our foliage around here typically peaks from roughly the 15th through the 27th, usually, and I have a feeling this year will be a pretty good year. We've had pretty favorable conditions of late with relatively dry weather, relatively warm days, relatively cold nights. Pretty good recipe for a pretty good foliage season this year. I'll have more updates on the foliage online on future editions of Weather for Weather Geeks and on 21 News at 6 and 11. Thank you for watching tonight's edition of this video, and I'll see you back here on Wednesday.